Hey guys, it's Chris. From fears of natural events to fears that can cripple people's lives and more. Join me as I show you the scariest phobias that people actually have. Number 10. Arachnophobia. Arguably one of the most widespread fears in the world, arachnophobia is the fear of spiders. One of the reasons that many people have this fear is because they don't like bugs or arachnids, of which spiders are obviously one of them. People with arachnophobia can't even look at pictures of spiders, and they can get big. Oftentimes, what trips people out about spiders is that they can come in all shapes, sizes, and colors and appear in your home without warning or even really making a sound. People can even wake up in a perfectly secure home and find a spider on their wall or even on them, which obviously just ratchets up the fear even more. It also doesn't help matters that spiders can at times be very venomous. Bites can even kill people depending on the species. What kind of freaks people out most if they encounter a spider is that they just start running around like crazy. While it may seem like a low-key fear, it should be noted that if you have this in a country where staying inside most of the day is not an option, it can be a crippling thing. Spiders are often found on the ground, in trees, and they've even been known to rain down from the sky. That's terrifying. There have even been cases of them covering entire fields in spiderwebs, showing that they can truly be anywhere and thus are a fear that's kind of understandable. Fun fact, there's a movie called Arachnophobia and it fully exploits the fear of spiders. So if you have arachnophobia, I do not recommend watching that movie. Number 9. Aerophobia. On the surface, aerophobia might seem like one that is rather easy to combat. It's the fear of flying. But you're thinking about this all wrong, because at times flying is the only way to get somewhere. For example, imagine having aerophobia on a job where you need to travel across the country in quick time, meaning driving or taking a train really wouldn't be an option. Or one where you need to fly all over the world. Having a fear of flying can literally cost you that job. Or what about visiting family members or just going on a tropical getaway? And if you have never seen a person with aerophobia, the intensity in which they try and not get on the plane or panic once they are in it is no laughing matter. What's more, it even goes beyond just basic fear of flying. Sometimes it's as simple as being afraid of fresh air or drafts of air because you don't know where they come from at times. If that wasn't bad enough, depending on the level of fear within the person, they can even have a panic attack just from mentioning flying or an airplane, which shows that while this may be a basic fear, it's one that can be rather devastating to a person. And now for number 8, but first, do you have one of these phobias? And if so, which one? Do you have any advice for people that might be dealing with one of these phobias? Let us know in the comments below, and then be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 8. Nyctophobia. In the world today, day and night isn't just something we have, it's a vital part of the world itself. Without night and the darkness it brings, the world would suffer, and more than likely overheat because there'd be nothing to cool it down. I mean, we need day and night to survive. Our whole biological rhythm needs it. But for those with nyctophobia, the coming of night brings forth all the fear that could possibly be within oneself, as it's the fear of the dark. On one hand, this is a very common fear among children who see monsters and moving shadows and have to sleep with a nightlight on to get through the night. Were you like this as a kid? I think we've all kind of been there. And it's not a joke of a fear, because as you hopefully know, darkness comes in many forms, and it can happen in places you wouldn't expect. Nyctophobia produces symptoms beyond the normal instinctive parameters, such as breathlessness, excessive sweating, nausea, dry mouth, feeling sick, shaking, heart palpitations, inability to speak or think clearly, or sensations of detachment from reality and death. The fear can play tricks with your mind and make you think you're in danger, which will make you react in various ways that could be detrimental. Plus, if you try and stay awake to fight the darkness, you'll be hurting your body in the long run because it really does need sleep. It also means that going into places like closets, dark tunnels, and other places without natural light will be a no-go because the person just won't risk being in the darkness. Number 7. Glossophobia. If you're unaware of this particular phobia, don't be alarmed. It's simply the fear of public speaking, which may be a phobia that you aren't really sure is really worthy of being called scary. And yet for those who have this particular fear, it's crippling in ways that you can't possibly understand. Think of it like this. Imagine you're with a group of friends. What do you do with them? More than likely, you decide to go and talk with them about recent events, what's going on in their lives, etc. But if you had glossophobia, you more than likely wouldn't be able to do that. Because while most people think that fear of public speaking means going up in front of a large crowd to talk, it can be just as simple as talking in front of friends or family. The anxiety that builds up in them makes it hard to talk in small groups, just as much as it is about being in front of large crowds. What's more, the fear and anxiety can be so crippling that they'll literally break down into tears because they just can't do it, and that can be a powerful motivator to not try and do it again. Number 6. Claustrophobia. One of the more classic phobias, if you will, claustrophobia is the fear of enclosed spaces, which in the world we live in is something that can be very hard to avoid. For example, you might think of a closed space like the foundation of a home that people sometimes have to crawl into in order to get a job done, or an alley, or a tunnel in certain cases. But an enclosed space can be something as simple as an elevator, especially if that elevator is crowded and the person feels that they're literally trapped inside. It can get worse though. Being in a car can sometimes trigger an attack, because depending on its size and the person's ability to move or lack thereof, that could be enough to get them scared. Even wearing certain tight clothing isn't an option because of how restrictive it can make a person feel. So if you have severe claustrophobia, you're going to be looking for a way to get out of a tight space, even if it's one that's perfectly safe. Number 5. Agoraphobia. In many ways, agoraphobia is the opposite of claustrophobia, because while claustrophobia is the fear of enclosed spaces, agoraphobia is the fear of open spaces, which basically means the entire world in a certain sense. To be clear, this goes much deeper than it sounds, because it's not that they're afraid of being in an open space per se, but rather they view the area that is very open as a danger. As in, it's something that can't be easily escaped, or a place where danger is all around you and you can't tell where the threat is. So for example, if you were to put a person with agoraphobia in an open field, they would likely constantly be looking around for a way out, and to make sure that something wasn't about to get them. This is arguably one of the most crippling fears in the entire world for a very simple reason. If the anxiety and the fear is enough in the person, they'll never want to leave their house. Picture that for a second, having such fear of what might be out there that you choose to stay inside and never experience any of what's out there in the world. Could you imagine living that way? Most wouldn't be able to, yet some do because of agoraphobia. Number 4. COULROPHOBIA. The term irrational fear is meant to define fears that honestly shouldn't make people scared, and yet do. And few fears are as justified in that term as coulrophobia, the fear of clowns. What's rather curious about this fear is that about 7.8% of Americans alone are afraid of clowns, and the reaction to them can be rather traumatic to the person involved. This, of course, has spawned a series of evil clowns, as they're known, ones that are meant to prey upon the fear of them. Great examples of this include Pennywise from Stephen King's It, the Joker from DC Comics, and more. As to what really sets off people about clowns, well, it's rather unknown. It's likely their entire look with a mix of their clothing, their face paint, and more. Either way, if you have this fear, you will not be clowning around. Number 3. Chronophobia. In many ways, chronophobia is a fear that the majority of people have in a certain context, because chronophobia is the fear of time passing. Now, usually chronophobia is triggered in a person by a certain state of mind. For example, depression, regular anxiety, and the fear that things are just going too fast, and thus you need to do more in order to make up for the time that you've lost. Other versions are when you look at your life and you feel that you haven't done anything, and yet time keeps passing on as if you don't matter. And that anxiety and fear mixes together to cause problems for the person. The real problem with this fear is that it's always going to be there in some way because time doesn't stop. The best way to fight it is to accept that time is constantly moving, and that you just need to do the best you can with the time you have, so you don't have regrets later on. Number 2. Anthropophobia. Can you guess what this particular phobia is? We'll give you a hint. If you're with a friend watching this right now, you don't have this phobia. Anthropophobia is a fear of people. To some, this might sound impossible. How can someone be afraid of all people? But it's a phobia that's real, and it can happen in ways that truly ruin lives. It can be a traumatic event that sets it off, or just an innate fear of people in general. And we do mean people in general because people with anthropophobia will rarely, if ever, associate with people face to face, let alone in a crowd. Even being with family, the family who raised you even, can cause you to suffer extreme anxiety. Thus, people with this condition will only communicate verbally through phone chats, written letters, or other mediums where face-to-face contact isn't an option. These people live in isolation so they never have to deal with others. Number 1. Heliophobia. If you were to go outside right now and look up in the sky, more than likely you would see the sun, and that alone would prove you don't have heliophobia, as it's the fear of the sun. Why would people be afraid of the sun? Well, some people fear the light that it brings, and the fear that they could get cancer from overexposure. Some people think that the sun is constantly cooking them, and thus they try and get out of it as quickly as they can. Then there are those who have a legit fear of the sun via a rare skin disease, xeroderma pigmentosum, which is a condition where your skin is so sensitive to the sun that it'll burn instantly upon exposure. So for these people, being inside all the time is kind of a necessity, and that can be crippling to one wanting to experience the world. Thanks for watching. What did you think of these phobias that are truly terrifying? Which one were you surprised? Were you surprised by some of the ones that made the list here? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to World List, and I'll see you next time on the channel.